Okay, welcome to a short little tutorial on some ideas of what you could do to improve your images that you're going to include on your contact sheet for the alphabet assignment. Just a reminder, you need at least 24 images, and when you put them together in the contact sheet, they need to spell out a phrase. So for example, we have Enza's from last year, and hers, if you look at the file names, is I am on the pursuit of happiness. And some of these maybe aren't as obvious when you look at them, but if you look closely at the file names, which I'll come back to, you can see after the number it gives you the actual letter. So 23 is N, 24 is E, and so on. So those are the parameters for your contact sheet. I want to show you some quick improvements that you could make to make your overall contact sheet images stand out and emphasize the actual letter most effectively. So first thing, I'd like you to save the two images. One is letter R and one is letter O, tree trunk. So I have them over here. I'm going to File, Open. Letter R, this one is a little bit underexposed, so I'd like to use that one for illustration purposes. So this is pretty well cropped, but let's say there was a lot of extraneous information around this. You would simply select the crop tool. If for some reason you're not getting, like for example, if you're getting this and you're frustrated, just go up here. You can choose a different aspect ratio. So 5:7 works best when you've got a shorter edge and a longer edge. And then of course you can drag this to make this as large or small as you want. Let's say only this part of the image was where my letter was, then I would do this and I would hit enter to accept the crop changes. Right here, this very useful bar is called the history panel. If you open this, you can see all of your commands. I think Photoshop lets you save up to 20 commands or so. So I don't want to keep this crop. I'm going to go back to where I opened it. Now when I start doing anything else, it's going to override everything below this. But the history panel is super helpful to go back. Another thing you can do is Command Z to undo. So once I've got this cropped the way I want it, let's assume this is even more underexposed than what it actually is. There are two things you can do to adjust. There's a few things, but we're gonna work with two adjustment layers that you can use in improving the exposure of your images that you're going to include. So the first one is levels. This one shows the distribution of your blacks, midtones, or shadows, midtones, and highlights. And you can see as you move this to the right, you include more shadows. You can adjust the midtones to make it a little bit richer of an image. You can also bring the highlights this way to get more highlights in. This is not what you want. This is a good example of areas that are blown out, so you can't see any detail or midtones in here. It's way too overexposed, so you don't want that. So ideally you will have the black right around. See right here we have a little bit of clipping where it's flat, so we want to bring it to where the graphic or the output here starts rising. Okay, let's say I wasn't sure if I liked that. I could turn this off. This is where I originally started. This is my image. Another way to adjust exposure is a curves adjustment layer. And again, you can pick this up and you can drag this to bring out the highlights. You can actually click to create different anchor points to improve the midtones. Now the general rule of thumb is that you want this to be a gentle curve. So even if you brought some of these down, for example, you don't want it to be like an abrupt, you want it to be a gentle S-curve. This one takes a little bit more effort to get mastery over, but if you play around with it a little bit, you might find it improves the exposure of your images. There's also a very simple exposure where you come this way, you overexpose slightly, you go that way, you underexpose slightly. And then you can -1 stop of exposure, -2 stops of exposure, so that's quite underexposed. You can +1 stop of exposure, +2 stops of exposure. Mostly you're going to want to work with custom, but this may or may not be one that works for your images. So again, you're going to play around with levels, curves, and exposure. The next image I want you to look at is a color image. So open up the image that's called Letter O Tree Trunk from Edmodo. You should save it to your USB first. And this has slight color. I'm just going to escape to get rid of the crop. If I Command plus, I can get closer. And for this one, I did apply a vibrance just for purposes here. I'm going to show you how to get rid of, you can drag this down to the garbage. So this one right here is the vibrance and saturation. Vibrance is more subtle. So if you do this, it's going to bring out more subtle tones. Saturation is a lot more obvious. And when there's even more colors in the scenes, it can tend to look really fakey. So really be careful with saturation. But for this image in particular, where our purpose is to emphasize the letter, it is helpful to pump up some of those values so the letter kind of stands out, the image is a little bit more interesting. So once you have correctly or improved, I should say, the exposure and the vibrance and saturation of each of your images for the contact sheet, you're going to save them in a file, and the way that you save them is very important. So if we look at ENZAs, just going to zoom in here, you can tell, so the images, the first image that I want on my contact sheet is going to be letter underscore O1. It can't just be letter 1, it has to be O1. Dot, whatever the letter of the alphabet is that this image is representing. Dot alphabet assignment, and what you can't see is each image also after alphabet assignment says underscore, and then it would say ENZA or underscore Borson. So include the letter, the number that you want it to be on your contact sheet, the actual number, the alphabet assignment in this case, or whatever the assignment's name, and then your name. Once you've saved all of your images in a file, and they have to be in their own unique file, I would call it contact sheet or something like that. So all of your edited alphabet assignment photos will get saved to that file as you edit them. Then you're going to save them this way, so they indicate the number in the order of which you want them to be laid out on your contact sheet and the actual number. When you're all done and they are saved in their own file, you're going to go to Photoshop, File, Automate, Contact Sheet 2. Now in here, this will allow you, it's just making me wait, will allow you to select the folder. So it says choose folder, and then you go and you select the actual folder with all of your edited contact sheet images. Press open, and then once you do that, you'll see my folder here. You press OK. Down here, you can change your columns and your rows. You'd like to try and make sure that all of your images fit on one page if possible, but I wouldn't do more than 5 columns and 5 rows. Your images get too small to see. So if you need to go into a different, if you need to have more, if you have more images than 25, keep your columns to 5, your rows to 5, and it will just spill over onto a separate page. So your contact sheet will be 2 pages instead of 1. When you're done, you hit OK, and then you wait for Photoshop to generate your contact sheet. I believe I only had a couple images in that file, so it won't show up with many here, and it sometimes takes a while, so I may not, oh, there we go. Okay, so this would be my contact sheet with those images, and the way that I saved these images, so you can see here image O1, image O2, and then these go, yours will say image O1, image O2, image O3, image O4, and so forth. But then you will have a contact sheet with thumbnail versions of all of the images that you took for the alphabet assignment. You will submit that as a JPEG in the appropriate Edmodo folder, and then you will begin working on the editing and preparation of the 2 enlargements that you're going to work on for the alphabet assignment, and further instructions will follow for that. Good luck!